everyone. I am Eric Pye from Rocketman Tech. I'm the VP of Business Development, and welcome to JNUC 2022 in sunny San Diego. So for this presentation, From Good to Great, Planning Ahead to Get the Most Out of Jamf, we're going to be talking about your Jamf servers and how we can go from that place of, we're in a good spot with Jamf, but we know we can get more out of it. And it all boils down to planning ahead. Like the great philosopher Owen Wilson once said in the heart-wrenching and inspiring rom-com Wedding Crashers, sometimes they say that we only use 10% of our brains. I think we only use 10% of our hearts. And if Owen were given the chance to expand on that thought, he surely would have said, and I know we're only using 10% of our Jamf server. So Rocketman Tech, my organization, we are an Apple-only, Jamf-only MSP and consultant. Our team gets brought in to organizations that are looking to get more out of Jamf, and we work with the clients and the different stakeholders to come up with an idea of what does good and great look like in terms of your Jamf server. And then we put together a detailed project roadmap for creating what great looks like. At Rocketman Tech, we also host a monthly virtual Mac admin meetup where we get to meet with some of the best minds in Jamf management. We post that on the Jamf Nation website under the user groups for the virtual Mac admin meetups. They're always free, always casual, so please don't hesitate to join those. So let's go ahead and dive into going from good to great. So as we look at this project, or as we look at these items, they're pretty vague, and I wanted to keep it vague because when you're going from good to great, a lot of the steps to get there can blend together. There's definitely an order of operations when it comes to going from good to great, but there's a lot of fluidity in the process. The idea is to try and reduce the amount of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes the cart can already be so far in front of the horse, and that can just create a real issue when you're trying to actually accomplish going from good to great. So we're going to discuss goals and visions. We're going to discuss putting that plan together and how to actually create the plan itself, the realizations and roadblocks that we have while we're trying to execute on the plan, and then forward, onward, and upward. How do we make sure that we maintain what we've gone ahead and set up? So the first thing that we're going to discuss are goals. I know we're all familiar with goal setting and setting SMART goals, but when it comes to having a better Jamf server, we get in front of a lot of clients that just say, we want to have a better Jamf server. We want our utilization of Jamf to increase. These are great sentiments, but they're not goals. Understanding a clear vision for what great looks like within your organization is by far the most important step to the process. There are clear-cut goals that we can strive for with Jamf, but depending on the environment, it might not be straightforward on what it's going to take to get there. All of these goals have milestones along the way. Some require cross-departmental collaboration. Some might require some scripting prowess, but just about all of them require a clear-cut end goal. Many milestones and many of the mini goals along the way are what we can start to chip away at as we achieve these goals. As I was thinking about this presentation, there was just this one image in the back of my head from Nicholas Sparks' The Notebook. Let me know if you're a Nicholas Sparks fan. Where he's trying to figure out, what do you want? And sometimes it feels like that when we're working with clients. What do you want? Better. Great. So what do you want? Well, we want to improve our utilization. Great. What do you want? What does that mean? And then we get to a monologue that, again, I was immediately reminded of SpongeBob from the Imagination episode, where the decision maker, who's not necessarily in charge of Jamf from a day-to-day standpoint, but it falls under their repertoires, paints the idea of, well, we want a better Jamf environment. And that sounds great. Who doesn't want to do better? The user base is completely on board with the image that he's painting of zero-touch provisioning and seamless workflows, and we're going to have a better environment. And that leaves you with wondering, oh man, how are we going to get there? This sounds like it's all going to fall in my lap. So let's go ahead and focus on goal setting, the first step that is by far the most important. So these are some examples of what good goals would look like in terms of going from good to great in your Jamf environment. Accomplishing these goals will create a better Jamf environment. In every single organization, there's a wide range of goals an organization may have within Jamf, but to accomplish any of them, we have to know what we're working towards. Once we set endgame goals like these, through collaboration among stakeholders, decision makers, the doers, we can start chipping away at creating the milestones required to accomplish them and get an idea of the expertise and personnel needed. The whole idea is figuring out what are we going to need when that time comes, rather than putting together a very loose plan and just figuring it out as we go. That's going to create a lot of roadblocks, and that's going to create a lot of speed bumps along the way. So rather than sit here and explain project management like some newfangled idea we came up with, I want to give everyone a look under the hood at this process. As we look at some of these goals, some of them you might recognize, some of them might not mean anything to you. But again, your organization needs to get together and decide, what are the goals that are right for us this year? Maybe it's the CIS benchmark level 2 standards because we need to be compliance ready. That's a big push this year, security focused. Maybe you just want to reorganize and have everything well documented so that if a new Jamf admin comes into your organization, they're not lost within this realm of siloed information. So step one is to have a vision meeting. In this vision meeting, this is not where we're creating the plan. This is where we're all just getting on the same page. I know everyone's favorite work activity is meetings, so good news, there's going to be a lot more meetings in this process. Hooray. You're going to see a lot in this process, but it is a necessary evil to getting everyone on the same page. We need to get everyone together that we think is a stakeholder in this process. Again, that process being creating a better Jamf environment. And we get everyone together and say, okay, we're going to improve the Jamf environment. What does that look like for us? Many of the common goals we discussed are incredibly difficult to achieve on an island. You can't just tell a system admin, hey, we're going to improve the Jamf functionality. Go ahead and do that. So the input's going to be needed from several different stakeholders, having this vision meeting to decide, what's not working for us? What should we improve on? What are our tangible goals going to be? Do we want to go for zero-touch provisioning? Or are we okay with our provisioning process right now, but we really would need to get a better hold of our inventory? What are the obstacles that we're going to face on the way to these goals? If we want to implement zero-touch provisioning, we're probably going to need a scripting guru somewhere along the way, and it'd be great to have some subject matter experts that have done it before to be able to consult with. And then we're also going to need some pilot groups, having conversations like that to try and get everything on the table to decide, what do we want to achieve? And what are we going to run into to try and get to that goal? We want to know that now before we even start. I was working with Hugo, who's a Rocketman engineer, and I was trying to get his idea of, what are the biggest obstacles that our clients face and the organizations we work with in trying to accomplish creating a better environment. And without any hesitation, Hugo replied, not having a clear vision of the goal and not having everyone on the same page. So I don't know how well you guys can see this, or we're going to have a handout just to help create a more elegant idea of what planning actually looks like. But let's say that we've had our vision meeting, we've had a vision of the things that we want to accomplish, and it's time to start crafting a plan. Just because we have had that vision meeting, though, it doesn't mean that we have a plan. But now that we have a clear and tangible goal, we can start creating it. What's on screen here is page 1 of 6 of an example of a Rocketman roadmap for creating a better Jamf environment. Once everyone agrees on what those goals are, we can start prepping for the journey. So looking at this page, we've got things like we want to document our best practices. Remediation is very important. We want to go ahead and knock out some of the roadblocks and the inconsistencies within Jamf, but we're going to go for a zero-touch provisioning process. We'd like to have that in place by the end of the year. Now that we know that, okay, zero touch is something that we're going to work with, we can start chipping away at what goes into zero touch. We can start asking some of those questions, such as, do we want to do a simple configuration? Or do we want to automate everything? How much do we want to leave on the end user? Do we want to utilize an identity provider? It's not necessary to do zero touch with, but it sure makes things easier. Are we going to use DEP Notify as a endpoint provisioning piece to help coach the users through what that process is when they do get their device out of the shrink wrap and they open it up? Dep notify window can help brand, brand that first day for the employee, and then also lead them through the process. Do we want to put something like that together? Are all of our devices file vault encrypted with passwords escrowed in Jamf? Do we have our groups organized? Do we know who is going to get the different configurations? A lot of times, an accountant is going to get a very differently provisioned device than an engineer is going to get within an organization. So, starting to have conversations like that, really digging into the details of what your goal is and what we think all of the possible milestones and little pieces that we'll need to accomplish to get there. What do those look like? It's going to take a lot of work, but that's okay. Everybody here is capable of starting to iron out some of those items. So let's look at the plan a little bit further. Now that we've decided on zero touch provisioning, we've gone and exploded this one step into several pages, getting ready for the journey. We have some of the variables ironed out, and we can start assigning tasks and creating those milestones. Not only do we need to prepare the environment to build zero touch, but also prepare the various teams involved to know what to expect, which questions we need answered from them, what sort of preferences they might have. For instance, if in this Be Better process, the security team has also shared that, well, we really think a better environment would be if we can harden the environment with more strict password requirements. We're not using an identity provider. So if we use one of those, maybe we can implement a rotating timeline of passwords. We can manage the passwords to require certain character counts, everything that you would typically see when it comes to managing passwords. And if we're going to have an identity provider, man, we would sure like to know about that before we start the process rather than halfway into the process, because it does make setting up zero touch workflows a little bit easier and a bit cleaner. Well, it definitely makes it cleaner. So fast forward to when we have those zero touch workflows in place, and we're using DEP Notify to do that. Not only did it take some pretty talented scripting gurus to get there, but we're also going to need to have a variety of pilot groups ready to test those workflows and make the changes needed. So as we start laying out the items that we think we're going to need along the way, we can at least give ourselves a shot at seeing, okay, who are we going to need? What kind of skill sets are we going to need? Because these are not great things to pop up as a surprise when you're 3 months into trying to set up zero touch, only to realize, hey, we don't have a great Python scripter. Oops. So the plan is never perfect, but it's always worth it. Spending the hours to gather as much research and information as you can and getting it all on the table to the best of your abilities is going to be the best way to create an achievable goal and minimize those roadblocks. Now, there are a lot of roadblocks that are on the way, and I want to touch on a couple of those here. I think one of the most common roadblocks that we see is just budgets. So when it comes to creating a better Jamf environment, it's not all just blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes there's ancillary pieces of software that we're going to need to implement. Sometimes you need to bring in a subject matter expert or a third party to help lead you along the way. And being prepared with some of those expectations is really nice to know on day 1 or day 2 of this process, rather than way down the line. We've already started to set things up only to find out that we have zero budget to try and add a piece of software that we need to bring this home. So I guess the whole project's put on the back burner, where it seems like being better at Jamf or getting better Jamf utilization, that's a project that seems to always live on the back burner. Some other very common roadblocks that we see are the skills gap and time commitment. So everybody on this call is capable of developing the skill set to create a better Jamf environment, but it's going to take some research. It's going to take some learning opportunities. Maybe you're not a great Python and Bash scripter. Well, it's hard to become a great Python or Bash scripter overnight. But if you have the time or the resources and you know that that's coming, maybe in a month or two, you can work up your expertise to understand what you need for that. A lot of the goals that we're looking at that clients are seeking do require something like a Jamf 400 skill set. Not every single time, but as you're looking at getting better with Jamf, maybe you look internally and see, all right, well, maybe I can improve my understanding of Jamf, finish out the Jamf training courses, And then when you get Jamf 400 type obstacles, you're ready to overcome them, or you at least have some better resources to help you plan for what it's going to take to overcome those obstacles. And then also Jamf API prowess. That's a very common one that we see. The Jamf API is extremely powerful, and I know our engineers utilize interacting with the Jamf API often and in so many of the different deliverables that we provide. This is kind of, I know, I feel like I've beaten this horse dead a little bit. I don't know if I can say that, but from a communication and unspoken red tape standpoint, being able to know the right people that you're going to need access to is very important. Everyone has busy schedules and more than their fair share on their plate. Projects can get held up for months, and you can lose momentum trying to schedule with the right people. I think we've all been there before. Our Rocketman engineers all like to say, when you're working with people, if you want to go fast, you have to go slow. You also have to manage expectations and let people know, hey, we're going to need pilot groups from these individuals on these days. So everyone just be ready to expect that. If you have those expectations, but you haven't told anybody, and suddenly they say, oh, well, I'm not ready for that. You get into the washing machine of weeks and weeks go by of, man, we really need to have that meeting to keep progressing this project. And now we need to have a meeting to remind ourselves what this meeting has to be about so we don't waste that time. And you can see the trend here. So just the communication and having the unspoken red tape started to be addressed. And then again, such as Hugo said, and like we've said throughout this whole presentation, lack of a unified vision is easily the biggest thing that sinks the ship. We need to make sure everyone's on the same page for what we're working towards as an organization. So now we've addressed some roadblocks. We've discussed that being able to get better with Jamf involves a lot of meetings and setting that clear vision and then chipping away at what steps do we need to accomplish in order to achieve that vision? And what are the roadblocks that we might have? Let's say we finally get there. All right, so we've got everything set up, and now we look forward, upward, onward to what's next now that we've achieved the goals that we had set out for ourselves in the Jamf environment. So everybody say it with me. We set it and forget it. No, we don't do that. This is not a newfangled rotisserie oven. We do not set it and forget it. The workflows that we set up to achieve the goals within Jamf to go from good to great, they're complex, elegant workflows, and they need consistent maintenance. And they also need to have consistent documentation so that everybody within your organization that might be involved with keeping them up to date has the information at their fingertips to keep your workflows up to date. I was really excited to put this slide in because this, along with the Ryan Gosling slide, I couldn't stop thinking about when I was putting this presentation together. So I'm glad I snuck this in here. Continuing to look at forward, upward, and onward within our organization. From a maintenance standpoint, what are the things that we're going to need to do to continue to maintain our environment now that we've gone from good to great? Because we would sure hate to go from great to good because we've let certain workflows fall into disrepair. Maintaining Mac deployment automation architecture, maintaining the documentation standards, patch management, enforcing password maintenance and security policies that you've agreed upon within your organization, and just being able to set up the procedures that when incidents happen, when you have problems from like a change management standpoint, configuration management, these are all conversations that need to be had to say, okay, who's in charge of fixing things when things break? Who's in charge of managing a change management piece? If everybody says, hey, we set up that DEP notify script or that DEP notify script, and we think it's really elegant on the IT team, but we're starting to get feedback that it's confusing, who's that going to fall back onto to go ahead and make those changes? Because you're never really done. It's kind of like a game of golf where you can't master the sport. You can have an extremely elegant environment, but you're going to have to continue to work and continue to practice and continue to learn as the Apple landscape continues to change. New Mac OS versions continue to come out, Jamf updates. All of these things change, not just the software itself, but how we do things and what are the best methods to employ some of these workflows. Just to finish with another great philosopher, J.J. Watt, He always says success is least and rent is due every day. And while that's, cringy eye roll of a commercial, it was actually a very powerful commercial. I remember that one. Good to think about when you're in the gym. It is good to remember that just because we have these things set up, it's important to maintain them and stay on top of every single day. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this presentation. Uh, this is one of those topics that we could talk about for hours and hours. It's what we do with our clients. It's hard to fit everything that we need to discuss how to go from good to great into a short presentation here. But just to reiterate, it starts with, if you have one takeaway, it starts with getting everybody on the same page. We all have to understand a clear vision for what does our organization believe great looks like, so we can start putting the plan in place in order to get there. Have a great rest of your JNUC 2022, everyone. Look forward to meeting you and seeing some of you. And thank you again for making it this far into my presentation. Take care, everyone. I appreciate it.
I mean, that went